Alright, Esther is this way. I'm gonna mark it this time. Oh my goodness. This is a long chapter. Again, I am sorry if I butcher any of these names, but I will do my best. Alright. Chapter 2. Oh yeah, I did say I was going to do an overview, my bad. Alright, so Esther was written about 478 to 473 BC, and nobody knows who the author is. It's anonymous. It kind of just tells us how God uses anyone in any way to help his people, and that he can do whatever he wants to. He is all-powerful, all-knowing, and it's pretty much what it's showing. It's showing how should I put this? A lower class girl was put into a position where she saved her entire people. And none of that was achieved without God's doing. And so it's an example to us of how God uses everyone and anyone and everyone to help his kingdom, and that you're not worthless. You have a purpose. Now, your purpose may be small or may be big, but you have a purpose. And no matter what it is, God has a plan for you, and he can use you to do anything. So, Chapter 2. After these things, when the anger of King Ahasuerus was abated, he remembered Vashti and what she had done and what had been decreed against her. Then the king's young men who attended him said, "Let beautiful young virgins be sought out for the king, and let the king appoint officers in all the provinces of his kingdom to gather all the beautiful young virgins to the harem in Susa the citadel under custody of Hegai, the king's eunuch, who is in charge of the women. Let their cosmetics be given them, and let the young woman who pleases the king be queen instead of Vashti." This pleased the king, and he did so. Now there was a Jew in Susa the citadel whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, son of Shimei, son of Kish, a Benjaminite, who had been carried away from Jerusalem among the captives carried away from Jeconiah, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had carried away. He was bringing up Hadassah, that is Esther, the daughter of his uncle, for she had neither father nor mother. The young woman had a beautiful figure and was lovely to look at. And when her father and her mother died, Mordecai took care of her as his own daughter. So when the king's order and his edict were proclaimed, and when many young women were gathered in Susa the citadel in custody of Hegai, Esther was also taken into the king's palace and put in custody of Hegai, who had charge of the women. And the young women pleased him and won his favor. And he quickly provided her with her cosmetics and her portion of food, and with 7 chosen young women from the king's palace, and advanced her and her young women to the best place in the harem. Esther had not made known her people or kindred, for Mordecai had commanded her not to make it known. And every day Mordecai walked in front of the court of the harem to learn how Esther was and what was happening to her. Now, when the turn came for each young woman to go into King Ahasuerus, after being 12 months under the regulations for the women, since this was the regular period of their beautifying, 6 months with oil of myrrh, and 6 months with spices and ointments for women. When the young women went into the king in this way, she was given whatever she desired to take with her from the harem to the king's palace. In the evening she would go in, and in the morning she would return to the second harem in custody of, oh my goodness gracious, Shashkez, the king's eunuch, who was in charge of the concubines. My goodness. She would not go in to the king again, unless the king delighted in her, and she was summoned by name. When the turn came for Esther, the daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, who had taken her as his own daughter, to go in to the king, she asked for nothing except what Hegai, the king's eunuch, who had charge of the women, advised. Now Esther was winning favor in the eyes of all who saw her. And when Esther was taken to King Ahasuerus into his royal palace in the 10th month, which is the month of Tebeth, and the 7th year of his reign, the king loved Esther more than all the women, and she won grace and favor in his sight, more than all the virgins, so that he set the royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. Then the king gave a great feast for all his officials and servants. It was Esther's feast. He also granted a remission of taxes to the provinces and gave gifts with royal generosity. Now when the virgins were gathered together the second time, Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. Esther had not made known her kindred or her people, as Mordecai had commanded her. For Esther obeyed Mordecai just as when she was brought up by him. In those days, as Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, Bigthan and Teresh, two of the king's eunuchs, who guarded the threshold, became angry and sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. And this came to be the knowledge of Mordecai, and he told it to Queen Esther, and Esther told the king in the name of Mordecai. When the affair was investigated and found to be so, the men were both hanged on the gallows, and it was recorded in the book of the Chronicles in the presence of the king. Whew, that was a mouthful. So, not really much to go over yet. Again, you see that all of the women are gathered. They pick 12, and then they have a year of beautifying, and then they're sent into the king one by one for an entire day. And then when they come out, they're not to go back in again unless the king calls them by name, which it does not say if he did at all. But since it says that, it kind of suggests that that happened. But then they see Esther. Esther was gaining favor in everyone's eyes. He sees Esther. He's like, yes, that's the one. That's my queen now. And then he threw a feast in her honor, and he granted a remission of taxes and gave this with generosity because he was so happy. Then you see that Mordecai discovered a plot to kill the king, and he told Esther. Esther told the king in Mordecai's name, and so it was found to be so. The men were both hanged, which puts Mordecai in a good position, and you already see that Esther and Mordecai are in good positions, and that God's already putting them in the right positions to be when he needs them. It's pretty much it. There's not much to go on yet. You do see, though, in chapter 20, Esther had not made known her kindred or her people as Mordecai had commanded her, for Esther obeyed Mordecai just as when she was brought up by him. So Mordecai is not her father or her mother, but he is like her caretaker. So you see the obedience, and he's the father figure. So you see that she's honoring her mother and father, if you will. She's following the commandments. She's doing everything that she should. She's doing right in the eyes of God so far. And that's interesting that it's so subtle, but you can make connections if you break stuff down deep enough. Which I'm still working on that. It takes time to learn that, but that's pretty much it for Esther chapter 2. So again, I might do Esther tomorrow. I don't know. It depends on how tired I am. I don't have much going on tomorrow, so I should be good to do Esther and Proverbs. I'm definitely doing Proverbs every day of the month because it's the last month of Proverbs. Again, one chapter of Proverbs, according to what day of the month it is. So, like, today's the 3rd, I think. So, is that right? Yeah. We're gonna go with, say it's the 3rd, and then you read Proverbs chapter 3rd. 27th, you read Proverbs chapter 27. Just read one chapter a day. Doesn't take long. 5-minute Devo. It's really easy. It doesn't matter when you do it, any time of the day. Man, I have a really bad concept of time. I don't even know what day it is. But that's fine. So that's pretty much Esther chapter 2 so far. That's all we have so far in our Esther series. So until possibly tomorrow, that's all I really have. So later.